Hey everybody, how you doing? I hope everyone is having a great week. We made it to yet another Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. We're going to start with part 2 of drawing Emma Watson, actually painting in airbrush on tinted paper with the Black India ink and the White India ink, which is by Bombay, which Dr. P.H. Martin, and the India ink is Black India ink, waterproof India ink, which is by Higgins. Those are very important to use those particular brands because other brands will not be as effective in this technique. So give me one quick moment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn on the chat. So this way we will be able to talk like we do every week. So it's just going to be one quick moment. So yeah, it's starting to get warm. Spring is sprung a little bit. Nothing crazy, but still enough to be noticeable. Last week, if you remember, we had like a snowstorm like the day before. So this week we are pretty much doing the whole spring thing. So it's pretty cool. I have to admit it's nice, and the daylight savings time and everything like that. Let's see if I see you guys. It'll just be a few moments. And then we'll get right back down to it as we do every week. Okay, so Willie, how's it going? How you doing, sir? Better to be early than late, right? And exoneration, exoneration. How you doing, man? Good to see you. The brush, I'm going to use two different brushes. I am going to use the Sotar Slim 2020. And I'm also going to use the Badger Extreme Patriot Arrow. Hey, Alan, how you been? Very cool to see you. So cool. From Florida, right? And so we got these two, and these are great airbrushes. I highly recommend them. I mean, really highly recommend them. So we'll be going over them, working with them today, so you get a good feeling of what they can do, what they can't do. So that's pretty cool. So what we're going to do is basically maybe start working on some of the lights here. And we are going to do that by using the White India ink by P.H. Martin. So it's going to be pretty cool. I'm in no rush to get this done because this is basically about you guys and girls learning as much about this technique and employing it on your own. So I'm not going to go speedy fast. I'm going to make sure I'm able to answer questions, things like that. One of the things I'm going to do first, I'm going to move aside my reference because that's very important when you are going to mix your white. So as you can see here, I have my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay India ink white, and it's not as exact as I use with the Black India ink. This is more like going for a skim milk sort of, so I'll just go ahead and this gets a little thick at times. Okay, so it's just like maybe about 4 or 5 drops in there. It actually comes out pretty thick, so you definitely have to water it down. Let me go get the water. Be right back. So with that being said, if you didn't water this down, it would not go through the airbrush at all. It would just be a disaster. Hey Rick, good to see you, man. Thanks so much for coming by. Very cool. So I'm just using any, not the 3-inch, but any particular water drop will do, because we really want to go for this. See how this sort of moves around like that, something like that, like skim milk. That would be fine. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to show off the Sotar 2020 on how, hey Keith, good to see you. How you been? And so Exoneration says, yes sir, I have a lot of civil issues. Currently I discuss in forum, and yes, I'm in Florida and just ordered a new myself, the HP-SBS, the side feed. Yes, I do like that airbrush. Very good choice, that's for sure. So we're going to show off how this 0.21 airbrush is going to do really good with the white, which is going to be great. So we're going to go and fire up this airbrush here. And since we are using the 2020 Slim, you don't want to just pour that in because it has a very small well. Very, very small. So you want to do that with the eyedropper. About 2, no more than 2 drops would be more than sufficient. And let me just get a paper towel. Even though the paper we're using is very thick, you still want to guard against any kind of mishaps or moisture might be on your surface before you go ahead and put down the artwork. It's all about protecting the artwork, that's for sure. Okay, so we have our 2020 Slim. Now we want to make sure that we have a good flow and what the ink is going to do. Because the ink, and you know, those who watch my live streams regularly with this technique realize that when you put down the white India ink, it doesn't show up right away. It takes a little bit. See that? And once it dries, it shows up. Now, like right now, it doesn't show up. But if you dry it, you'll see it starts to show up. And then if you dry it, see that? It shows up. So I can see now I have a very thin mixture, a little bit thinner than I normally do. Hey Bill, good morning. How are you, sir? Very good to see you. We'll put this aside. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on this light here that's on her breast. And one of the things with the white that everyone really has to worry about is pencil lines, because white is not forgiving with pencil lines. It will show up and it will come back to haunt you guys. So I can always come in later with the hair here, so I'm going to remove the drawing aspects of that. Same thing here. I'm just going to lightly keep the edge of this cast shadow from her arm. So let's go ahead. Now it's a good distance away. And as you can see, I'm being very slow and cautious. Now, you want to be like a chess player and think ahead. Now, this finger here, you want to very, very lighten that pencil line. You don't want that to come back to haunt you. So throughout the whole process, you're thinking about later in the artwork what it's going to be like, so you don't want to create problems down the line. It's sort of like in chess when you develop your pieces for the end game, and that's what you want to do now, is you're developing your pieces so everything is in place, so when you're finishing this up it's going to be a lot easier for final victory. Notice how beautiful this Slim is actually working with this. And as always, guys, always feel free to ask any questions. I'm here for you. And as I said before, we can always paint that hair in. That's not a very, you know, delicate process. And always let that catch up. Now, whenever you have one of Badger's airbrushes, or any airbrush, I always recommend getting the MAC valve. That's going to change it. It's going to change the game. You're able to adjust the pressure, air pressure, micro adjustments. See that? Now we have something really nice. So Alan says, headed to my PC so I can talk, watch, and try to fix the music production software. Oh, very cool, man. And so you see how we are basically working that out, which is very nice. Now, of course, in a perfect world, I can go right in with the darks, but I have the white set up, so I want to make sure that I'm using the white and, you know, get that process down a little bit. So, yeah, it's quiet in here, Bill. You know, it's okay. You know, might be, you know, one of those weeks, but it happens, you know. Always feel free, guys, to ask any questions. And Bill, man, thank you so much for that video, man. That was great. Thank you. I'm very honored. Thank you so much, sir. And so we did get to 2008 subscribers on this channel, which is very exciting. I'm going to do a commemoration commemoration video, which is going to be a lot of fun. Now I'm going to raise the pressure a little bit and let that white catch up. Oh yeah, I did send you an email. I'm sorry you didn't get it. I sent an email to you, Bill, letting you know how great that was. I hope you evidently you didn't get that video. I mean that email. But yes, thank you so much, Bill. That was fantastic. So we're out. So in the event we're out with the white, this is what I like to do. White is pretty, as anyone knows, right, Bill? White is a stickler. It's messy, it's thick, and it just causes problems. So what I like to do is just run some water through it right away. Just sort of get rid of any of the white that's in there. Make sure it's all clear. Then go in with the more white. That's the best way to handle it, I feel. Now I'm just going to put 2 drops in my Sotar. Sotar 2020 Slim is the newest Sotar that came out, and it really is a great airbrush. I recommend it because it's really fantastic. And oh, thank you so much, Willie. I appreciate that. So yeah, you know, we got up to 208, which is really cool, guys. And you know, I thank you guys for, you know, over the course of the year, all your support and, you know, encouragement. It goes a long way. It really does. So as you see, we're just creating that blast of light throughout here. You know, she has this really wonderful sunlight over here, as you can see in the reference photo. And it's just so nice to be able to go ahead and just be so subtle. You know, it's like, it's really like working in pastel, even though you're working in airbrush. Bill says, I'm going to order a GUI airbrush because it's the only thing I've not tried. GSI, is that GSI? Which one is that exactly? Forgive me, Bill, for not knowing. And that's pretty cool. It's always good to try the airbrushes, see, you know, what they have, what they don't, whether you know, something you would like to use, right? Not all airbrushes are created equal. What PSI now? Oh, Krios, Bill says. Mr. Hobby, they are Japanese. I heard good things about Krios, yes. Definitely, Bill. Thank you for that. I want to know what you think. Exoneration, Alan says, what PSI are you working at? I set my compressor, my California Air Tools 3 to 5 pound compressor, I'm not sure which one, and I go ahead and put it at 25, and then I micro adjust to exactly what I want. I say it's about 15 PSI more or less when I'm working in the white. It's not really a thick white, it's a very thin down white, so I can afford going very, very, very light with the PSI here. Okay, so got this, and it looks like, believe it or not, there's a drawing error here. And I'm going to have to address that right now. So this is, sometimes it doesn't happen too often, but you do have some drawing errors in this stage. I don't like to, but it does happen. And this is one case where it does occur. And you definitely you don't want to be making drawing corrections, major drawing corrections at this stage, but sometimes it does happen. And oh, so Alan says, okay, awesome. I used the method on Black India ink, 2 drops to 2 3-inch droppers of water. Yes, the exact ratio in the beginning. That's what you want to do when you're doing the beginning of the India ink method. That's for sure, Alan. And then Bill says, I run my compressor over a moisture trap regulator combo that into a 3-hose block with MAC valves built in. Very cool, very cool. That sounds like a very controlled way to do it. You definitely have to have a MAC valve somewhere. You can't just be going in and changing at the compressor. I don't know. I think, having control can only, the more control, the more simple the process is, and I'm all for that. Let's put this here. Okay, so I went ahead and fixed the drawing here. Yeah, that drawing, I don't know what happened, but it was a little screwy. And let's go ahead and let that dry a little bit. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and kill some of these pencil lines here. Here, of course, we have our shadow, our cast shadow right here. So we're going to do this blast of light right here. And before we do that, let's work on her index finger. Remember, let that dry and it'll lighten up. Because we're working on a very light mixture. Okay, so with this, you always you have to realize that since you do have the control like a pencil, you have to fill it up a little bit more than normal, actually a lot more. But I think the pros outweigh the cons. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the artwork aside. And like I said, with the white, when you refill it, you want to go ahead and shoot some water through it. Oh, Exoneration says he also has a California air compressor. I remember seeing that on Facebook. That's a nice one. That's I believe that's the 1 gallon you have, right? Which is great because I don't think you really need more than 1 gallon. So that is a fantastic one. And let's see. Willie says, Bill, I run almost the same way. Very cool. Good to hear how you guys are working, that's for sure. And like for instance, now Bill says, like for instance, I was doing a Tinkerbell freehand painting the other day, 5 minutes later spraying candies, and later working on a portrait. Yeah, definitely. You know, it's good to, you know, have your compressors back you up. So what I'm going to do right now is just get some of this white, put 2 drops in, maybe just 3 out, push the envelope a little bit. So as you can see, I'm going to move my ink out of the way, and before I go in, I always want to go ahead and test this out. Do your first initial spray after you refill away from the surface. So I'm pretty happy. So I always do some tests here, as you can see, playing around. So this is something I've been working on later in the week. This is actually some opaque applications of the India ink and white India ink, mixing them too. So that's sort of in the works right now. So that's sort of a technique that I'm sort of perfecting before I go public with it. And so let's go ahead and rework her index finger here. Okay, so you see right now we're getting a nice sense of light. This is not necessarily how light we're going to go, but we want to be like a sculptor and bring things forward. And that's what we're doing right now. We're just bringing different areas forward. And I'm a good distance away. I would say about maybe 4 to 5 inches away from the surface, because I want an even distribution of this white ink, which is really good. Bill says the opaque method would be good for beginners. Interesting you say that. I think the opaque method is good for beginners in a lot of senses, but I also think that, you know, with the whole blue shift, Bill, I think it could send people, you know, a lot of destroyed paintings. That's the one thing I'm worried about, Bill, is that it could go really bad really fast with opaque, especially with the black and white. You get a little bit of a wiggle room on the tinted paper, but not as much. So I'm trying to figure out a way to, you know, circumvent any of that blue shift, Bill. So that's one of the things I'm working on. Heat says, are you using white first, then black? Yes, I am. I'm using the white first because, remember, you can go darker over white, no problem. But if you go white over dark, you get the blue shift and a really ugly, horrible, disgusting look about it. And so this is a way of sort of circumventing, bringing the lights forward in the beginning stages, actually establishing a nice sense of volume in the very beginning, which I do like. And this is a technique that I have been, you know, yes, Willie says, Tim, you're a mad scientist with the ink. It's so true. And that's true. Yes, Bill, we could collaborate on that. That would be wonderful. Bill says perhaps we can collaborate on the blue shift. That would be great. I have some you know, some of my travel. I'd love to hear, you know, yours as well. And, you know, I have a hard time staying still with technique. I always want to do it better and different. I never really feel ever that I just want to stay put and do the same thing. Sort of where the whole India ink came about, because, you know, I was so tired of, you know, the whole thing with Createx and Wicked Colors and all of that. And, you know, those are great lines, and I'm not saying anything against it, but it's not the only way to go. It's not how I want to go. So I always wanted to work and go my own way, and this is definitely the manifestation of that. is the India Ink. You know, it's like I have certain goals that aren't congruent with paint companies, and so that's why I'm always looking for new ways. And the whole idea is one of the things I feel that really trips up many of the students is when the airbrush is not working well. And that's one of the things that I want to really help the student, the new, and the people returning to airbrush, that, airbrush is fun, that, it doesn't always have to trip you up. And this is a good way, the whole idea with the India Ink, to circumvent that tripping up with the just having flow problems. Because let's face it, acrylic is not made for the airbrush, and airbrush is not made for acrylic. It's the automotive guys, the guys who want to do it, they're pushing, those paint companies are pushing, because that's where a lot of money is coming from the automotive industry. And so that's why they're pushing it, pushing the water base and everything like that. The person that painting at the easel, like me, like you, they don't care about you. You're not even in their thought process. It's nice that they can get that market share, but they're not looking. They're looking for the, where the industry is sort of pointing to. So that's one of the reasons why I'm like, there has to be a better way, and that's why I'm devising this whole method, and just going to keep trying until I get something that, is just a great new way of looking at it. As you can see, I'm creating some more light here, which is really nice over here with the hat. So I have to say I'm really happy with the way that the white is actually working right now with the paper, because we're working on this paper here. It's Gunmetal by De La Rowney. It's Canford cardstock, and it comes in a pack of 10, sells for like $8, and it's perfect. It's nice and thick. It handles the India ink well. You're able to erase on it. So just a lot of good things about it, which I really like, and you'll enjoy it if you ever use it, with this method. It's not the only way to go. I never advocate that it's the only way to go, but I always advocate to push your technique, guys. Try new things. Always experiment. Always. It always helps you. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put this airbrush aside, and we're going to take out our second airbrush, which is the Badger Extreme Patriot Arrow, which is the best kept secret, which I'm no longer going to let it keep a secret. But this thing works like a charm. It really does. We're going to take our young lady aside here. We're going to take another piece here, and we're going to do our 3-to-3 mixture. So we're going to do 9 and 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're just increasing the ratio of 3-to-3, 1-to-1. And then we are going to take our 3-inch eyedropper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You don't get a full eyedropper, you put a little bit more. Okay, so now we have a nice mixture. This is our base mixture of when we start. It's a nice little bit darker than a light, a little bit lighter than a mid-tone. And we're going to go ahead and start working with that. And let's see, Bill says, if I can catch up, it's on my list. Very cool. Bill also says, I was looking for some Dreadnought at the art store, but wasn't happy with the texture of the Canson. Yeah, Canson is, I don't use Canson. Hate it, I pastel painter, I hate Canson. I hate the texture. And I'm adamant about hating Canson. It's horrible. And let me go ahead and get my other hose, and we'll go ahead and start with the midtones here. And Willie says, Bill, thanks for the video on the clear spray can, the clear and spray can. I'm going to doing a welding helmet, and I think that will be perfect. How cool. Yeah, Bill's doing some incredible videos. Definitely check it out. It's really cool. You're really doing some great things there, Bill. Keep it up. Really helping out a lot of people. And he says, so with your opaque method, are you using white first, then black? And are you still going to get, not at all, because, and that's the secret, is that white on darker color is a blue shift. And then if you have a lighter color over a darker color, there's no problem, which we're going to do now, and I'm going to illustrate that for you guys. So we're going to definitely test this out, test out our spray before we go on our artwork here. So, and we also, it's a good way to test out your flow, do a couple of lines, some dagger strokes. Okay, so we're in good shape. Now what we can do is we could start, now watch this. So I have a mid-tone right here over the white. And you can see there's no adverse side effects whatsoever, because a darker color over a lighter color isn't going to give you a problem. And Bill says, Willie, I definitely sold on it. As a fact, 2 days later, I was able to still use a can of clear and some aluminum panels. And very cool stuff. And I'm going to raise the air pressure. This is cool. You can tweak the air pressure. And I always like using, as far as Mac valves, I always use the Iwata Mac valves. You know, the external Mac valves, I like them the best. I think they're really good for, you know, keeping air leaks, and they really micro adjust, as they say. So definitely pick you up a Mac valve that is an Iwata Mac valve, definitely. So as you can see, Heath, we're having no problems with that, right? I mean, it's really working out very well. So as you can see here, you know, with the white, there are areas that are darker, and we can adjust that no problem whatsoever, which is very cool. Right now, we're not going for our darkest dark. As always, when we're in this sort of stage working, we're going for value relationships here. And then we progressively get darker as we progressively change our ratios, you see? And I'm just going to lower the... So as you can see, we're changing our ratios from the 3 to 3, which is right here. And then we progressively get darker until we are right here, and then we come in with the dark accents and then the highlights. So it's you definitely don't want to get too light too early, too dark too early, or too light too early. You want to work this up from the middle up. It's very important to do that. And let's see. Yes, Heat says, haven't tried the black on white. Definitely makes a big difference, and it sort of makes your work a lot more sculptural, especially using it with this with the gunmetal. This is gunmetal that we're using right now. Actually, the white works much better with the gunmetal and the Dreadnought Gray. That's why I'm really digging the gunmetal lately. There's a dark accent right here in the hair. We're not even going to bother with that right now. We just take a mental note that it's there. And that's, you know, what's going to really give your work this like really incredible volume down the line, which is really great. Now, when you're working, you let that dry. It's very crucial. So what we're going to do is we're going to dry that a little bit. Just put some air on it. And then see if we can retain that hard edge here of her eyebrow. There is no rush whatsoever. So just take your time. Beauty over speed. Always, always. And, you know, taking care of, you know, looking what's there is going to pay dividends. So really take your time. If you're not sure of anything, wait on it. Work out some other areas and maybe you can piece it together, but don't rush anything. Right now we're just building relationships here, value relationships. And then the rest will come together with patience. There's some really big shadow areas here. So let's see if we can go ahead and establish that. We can go ahead and bring in our freehand shields. Never ever be mistaken with stencils. Stencils are a bad word around here. So when you're doing freehand shields, yes, Bill says always value relationships. That's for sure. And so what we're going to do right now is we are just going to work on this cast shadow from her arm onto her collarbone and down her chest. Now the white, this shadow has a very interesting details within the shadow, and we can attempt to touch on some of that right now. Willie says, actually Heat says first, is that link on your site? I'm bad for watching as I get older and go fast. I don't think that question was for me. Willie says, Tim, have you tried getting the paper from Amazon? I'm wondering if it is, if it would come in bent in half. Now, I would not get the paper from Amazon only because I can get it from Dick Blick, and they take good care in getting it to me in one piece. But if you can get it from Amazon, I think you do have the ability, if it comes damaged, to you know, not accept it and get a refund. Because let's face it, if the paper is creased, it's no good to you. You're not going to be able to sell a drawing, no matter how good it is, on a creased paper. So definitely don't want to do that. Bill says it's in the description. He's talking about an earlier question. And okay, cool. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and work on some of this darker shadow here. People always ask me, you know, how do you get control with the airbrush? And the only answer I have is to put in the hours. Just practice. That's the best way. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to make sure that the drawing is fine here. Right here at this crease of her thumb is pretty much where this shirt ends here. Okay, cool. Now what we can do is now go ahead and paint that in. And you always want to save your paper, your table, and that always helps. And you can see I'm a good distance away. And of course here you have a shadow plane of the arm there. Same thing here. We can move this out of the way. And I like using the freehand shields here because you get that nice beautiful hard edge that's going to stay throughout the painting here. And you just sort of crawl along the surface here. When possible, always go perpendicular to the freehand shield. This way you get, it's just much cleaner. You don't have that border line, which is really good, and that's fantastic. And here I'm going to do some of these dark relationships here. And little by little it starts coming together. But as you can see, if I was going white over dark, it would be a disaster. But here, as you can see, there's no adverse side effects. And it's going to be fun going in more with that hand. But right now, we're not going to get too involved. In here, there's a lot of different values within the shadows. And that's something you want to look as you develop a painting. It's not just light and shadow, but what's going on in the details of those shadows. And notice I'm moving around a lot, which is very important. And over on this side is a really nice dark, and that's going to help actually describe the, which is really cool, it's going to help describe the back contours. And always when you have some hard edges here, it's always good to use your freehand shields. like I said, when you can, make sure you go perpendicular, not parallel to it. Same here. Now, what's interesting right here, you have a cast shadow, and cast shadows are very important to look at, very crucial. Just like that. And of course you want to use your freehand shield again. And this is a very dark over here, but the thing is that we are only just looking for the relationships, and we're going to come dark later. Because remember, we're still working with that 3 to 3, and some people might say, well, why not, since this is a you know, a transparent technique, that if you just go over and over again with this 3 to 3 method, eventually it'll get darker and darker. Very true, but why you don't want to do it? And the first reason why you don't want to do it is because you want economy of the paper surface. And you're going to start getting warping, and you're going to damage the paper. So that's why it's so important to wait on it. It's very, very important to wait on that. And so as you can see, I'm moving around the surface, and the goal is to create an overall image that I could definitely gauge the different value degrees and sort of work that, realize where I'm too dark and where I'm too light. So Willie says, Tim, I've really been struggling with the likeness of who I'm painting. Any tips? Definitely. I've been doing portraits since I was a kid, and one of the main things you want to work on when doing a portrait and a likeness is to not think about the likeness. And that's something that we could. Now, when I say don't think about the likeness, Willie, I'm not like, you know, I'm basically pay attention to the values, pay attention to proportions. Don't look at it as a face. Look at it as, you know, a culmination of values and lines, contours, and relationships. Worry about that. Also, like right now, and I know what the pitfalls that you're talking about, Willie, because if we worry too much about likeness, at this point I could say to myself, oh my God, it doesn't look like her. This is horrible. It doesn't look like her. That's where you fall into the trap, because it's not going to look like her because she's not even close to being done. I'll give you another case in point. Here's a portrait I did. This is of, so I'm not going to say who this is, but here's a portrait I did. And as far as the likeness, I didn't have the likeness for a while. And with this technique, I kept at it. I relaxed. Okay, where am I going wrong? And then go back in. So when you get to this finished state and it's not looking like her, that's when you say, okay, now what's happening with the likeness. But in this stage, Willie, you shouldn't be concerning yourself with likeness. Only large shapes and making sure your drawing is fine. All that stuff is really going to go a long way, Willie, to helping. So on your next portrait, I want you to think about that as you're going through it. And I know that will definitely help you. Another thing I think that's really important to get a likeness in your portraits is to uh, definitely uh, work on the large shapes and keep everything, work it from the beginning. Try and get the whole ensemble, and then it will be a lot easier to see where you're going off. But I see too many, especially in the airbrush world, and it drives me crazy. Is okay, so today we're going to do this eye really nice, and it's going to be really perfect, and then we're going to do the other eye, and then we're going to do the nose. Even if you do catch a likeness, you're going to lose, and this might be controversial, but I know it's true. You will lose the spirit of the person. You will not get that, you know, that gesture. You can if you're doing a couple of noses, an eye, a mouth. So, I really, you see, I was trained classically. 8 years of art school, studied at the best schools. Every medium, basically, I was blessed to learn. So, I learned from people who were rooted into the old masters. And it might not look flashy, but you don't want it to look flashy. You want it to look timeless. That's so much more important than having something look like it just stepped out of a magazine. I remember one time I was in a class of my teacher, my mentor, and I brought in something that was very, very slick. And he tore into me. And he said, this is not what it's about. It's about, getting, how did he phrase it? It's about the experience of seeing and looking deeper than just what your eye sees. Seeing the gesture and maybe exaggerating that gesture a little bit more to capture a moment or a person. Make sure. Okay. John Singer Sargent said, "A portrait is just a painting of a person with something wrong with the nose," meaning that it's almost impossible to catch a perfect likeness of a person. And John Singer Sargent, of course, is one of the greatest portrait painters in history of art. Yes, and Willie says, "Thanks for seeing improvement in my. I'm seeing improvement in my work, but the likeness is still off." And and that happens, and likenesses is it's a tricky thing. And control. You see, we just there we go. Same thing with this eye here. So what I like to move around. So I'm doing something in this eye. I like to do something in this eye. Same thing here. I darken the pupil on the other side. So I'm going to darken the pupil here. So another reason why I like to definitely have talk about control is that it will only come with time. There's no secret to it. It's just something that is just going to develop, you know. And let's see here. So Bill says your ability to create a likeness is simply a technical ability. Your ability to capture an emotion is an artistic one. I think now I have a little bit of that's a good point, but I do have a different side. My teacher Harvey Dinnerstein said that to really get a likeness of a person, you have to exaggerate what makes them an individual. If you can exaggerate what makes them an individual, you're sort of amplifying who they are. And that was a very good point. And I did find when I work was getting a little bit, you know, technically sound, but a little sterile. And so, you know, if you look at the work of Rembrandt van Rijn, you'll see that, you know, that's sort of the exaggeration of what makes that person who they are, sort of to create just, I mean, I'm not talking caricature, but just to create a little bit more of who they are. Almost like what a caricature artist does to the point of, you know, silliness or the point of cartoons, but I think in painting and drawing it could be beneficial. And I have seen that happen too. And Bill says your likeness is off. It's sometimes a proportion, but I would like to say likely a value issue. Yeah, it could be a number of things. I've seen paintings that would just like technically sound, but they just missed the mark. Have you ever seen some of those photorealists? I mean, they could do glass with candy in it and make it look amazing. And that same person, that same photorealist goes ahead and will do technically everything that is perfect for a portrait, yet it is off because, you know, a person is definitely not, you know, a glass jar of hard candies. And I think that's where a lot of the disparity is. But definitely being a fan of art history is that you want to really look at art history and see what makes an artist great and what makes an artist inferior. And true art history, not looking too much at the work of contemporaries. If you look at the work of contemporaries, you can fall in the same trap that they're in. So you want to make sure that you're rooted in the classics, which I think is important. And Bill says, I admire character artists a great deal, which is very cool. Not my thing, but highly admire. Some great character artists are out there. Yeah, throughout history. No one really knows this, but Claude Monet started out as a caricature artist. And that's how he sold his first work, doing caricatures. So I thought that would be a little bit of an interesting tidbit of information. You know, Claude Monet with the haystacks and, you know, the Impressionists. And he started out doing caricatures. So it's pretty neat. Artists throughout time had to do other stuff to pay the bills until their own stuff started making money. So I'm going to go ahead and put our paper here because I'm going to blast this one side here. You don't want to stain that one area, guys. You want to make sure that you let that catch up. You don't want to oversaturate the paper, and then you're going to be dealing with warping and then the integrity of the paper. So you want to definitely make sure that you're not going too crazy with it. Oh, let me go ahead and drink my green juice here. Okay. And so Bill says, like fur, pays for the stuff. Yes, exactly. You know, you have to, as artists, when. Now, Bill, you'll probably agree. In the past, I was able to get regular jobs, in corporate, and that always sort of freed me up to do my own artwork. After work was over. And now, being a bit older, uh, I find it much more difficult to find a place in corporate America, and I get turned down for regular jobs. So now my artwork is not only just, for artistic reasons, but I also have to pay the bills with it. So you sort of sink or swim, right? Because that's our only means of income. And when that happens, the artist is forced to find ways to make a living, and that happens, and that's when real creativity starts, right, Bill? How can we, make a living, and that's it's a challenge. But there are a lot of advantages to that. One of the reasons why the Beatles became so good was the fact that before they came to America, they did like 12-hour sets 7 days a week in Germany, and working together and just working over and over. They really honed their craft, and they were really like in sync as far as working together, synchronized, and they were just sharp. And they were able to have those breakthrough songs and records and everything, but it wouldn't have happened without, having to work on a regular basis. So yes, there are pluses. If you don't have to worry about money, you have the ability to go ahead and paint with exactly what you like. On the other hand, if you have to worry about money, you have to paint not necessarily what you would normally paint on your own, but your technique is getting much better, and you're learning the business of art. So, and then the chance of a breakthrough technically is actually much greater than if you were just, painting exactly what you want. So as you can see, we're developing the whole portrait, and that's my goal. Let's work on these shadows here, or folds I should say. It is a very quiet night, and that's a good thing too, because I'm able to perhaps just discuss the demonstration a little bit more. So sometimes a bad thing's a good thing. So one of the other good things about this Extreme Patriot Arrow, it has a really good amount of paint or ink you can put in there. And with this top, of course, it's so important to put on. But notice I haven't had to refill in a bit, and that's great. Hair, although very important, please do not be literal with hair, whatever you do. I'm just so tired of seeing all those little hairs and just, it's the real big thing about airbrushing now. Every little hairs, every little crease, all of that. It's not necessary. I mean, really isn't. What's more important about doing every little crease of the hair is actually getting the movement of hair and how the light actually cuts across it. So much more important than if you were just, concentrating on getting every little hair. We're not concentrating on that. And we're also not concentrating on a literal representation of the photograph. So Willie, now who was it out there that actually ordered the Extreme Patriot Arrow? I don't know if Willie, you said you were thinking of ordering it, or did you order the Patriot Arrow? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. See guys, I'm much more interested in the larger shapes, and this is where you're going to get your likeness, Willie, is the larger shapes are so much more important than getting hung up on individual hairs. Not saying that's what you do, but that's one of the traps, I think. And I think that's what the airbrush community is sort of propagating, that trap of getting every little individual hair. The portrait painters that you really should be looking at, or I should be looking at, and I do, are the oil painters, are the ones such as, John Singer Sargent, Thomas Eakins, throughout art history, Rembrandt, Frans Hals is a great portrait painter to look at. Some of the simplifications of the lights and darks to create stunning portraits. Some of the 18th and 19th century English portrait painters. So Henry Raeburn, for instance, is an amazing portrait painter, and how he simplifies things, which is really great. Real subtle value shifts here. And we want to basically start to get that turning of the form here, like you see in the reference photo over here. And that's what we're looking for in the face. But we're not going to do that too early, but we're just going to start to begin to establish some of those turning of the forms here. Okay, so it's 10:30. I'm just going to go ahead, take a very quick moment to make sure that the chat is working. And usually in the first hour, the chat needs to be the license needs to be put back on there. It's just the authorization thing that I have to do with XSplit. Hopefully they'll fix this bug. Just be one moment. And putting in the password. Okay. There we go. Now I should see. Okay, so I do see that some people were talking. Hey, what's up there, Raul? Thank you so much. Good to see you, man. So Raul, you got your Sotar, or was it the the Slim? Okay, so he says the Slim's on its way. Raul said you got your Sotar Slim, or was it the Badger Extreme, Raul? So yeah, I had to go ahead and fix this whole thing with the, with the chat. So, so let's see if I can see here. I'm going to go back a little bit. Let's see. So I do miss what you guys said earlier. So I have both, but really love the 2020. Yes, the 2020 is great. I love the 2020. I think I'm enamored with the Extreme Patriot. So I love them both. Raul says what I noticed about it is it's more refined tool feel than an Iwata or Olympus, and which feels like a piece of delicate art. Yes, I agree. It really does. I mean, Raul, and also, Heath and Willie and Bill, the 2020 Slim just is really something special in the sense that I don't think there's any airbrush like it. I don't think anything feels like it. So I really do love it. I agree, guys. Why I love the Badger Extreme Patriot is the versatility of it, which I really am in love with, I do love that versatility. Coming from, I used to, big fan of the Eclipse, the Iwata Eclipse. So that's why, that's why I'm so into, but only after I changed the trigger, that trigger, that really large trigger, it had to go. So I got rid of that. And Willie says, I love the 2020 Slim so much, I got a second one. Really? So you got two 2020 Slims. How cool is that? Wow. With the 2020, with the Badger Extreme Patriot arrow, you definitely want to get the regular trigger size. It's only like $5. But if you use that code TimothyPSA, you get like free shipping because it takes a 10% off. So that's very cool. So definitely use that code. And we're just going to work on this cast shadow here. There we go. So see how we have a nice feeling with that cast shadow. I'm going to look back and, oh, he says that the Slim is on the way. Very cool. So I can only go back to where it says, Bill, definitely I cannot go back to work between doctors, sick days, and etc. I find people who insist on artistic integrity to be kind of elitist and snobbish. Yeah, I think an artistic integrity is great if you don't have to make a living, right? I think, it's, that's a luxury that not many of us have. So let me see here. Bradley says hello, made it late. Hey, Bradley, good to see you. So cool. and haven't changed the trigger yet. I'm still trying the one that it came with. Yeah, I hated the one that it came with, and you know, that's just my own opinion, but I just didn't want to have to adjust to something. I want the airbrush to adjust. As you can see here, this is where that trigger is right now. It's not on my airbrush. I definitely removed that. But once I removed it, this thing came alive. This one, I really love this airbrush. Bradley says, I used my new badges for the first time tonight. The slim was awesome. The arrow needs a new trigger. Yes. When you get that new trigger, it's going to be fantastic. Oh, yeah, the slim is really great. I'm so glad you like it, Bradley. That's so cool. We are just basically, you know. Oh, Raul said, I kept my high trigger because I think it allows me really fine adjustments and more accuracy. Yes, I think that high trigger does do that, and that's cool, and I'm not against that at all. For me, I didn't want to get used to it. You know what I mean? I wanted to do something that I wanted something pretty much more the same feeling. So that's why when I got the regular trigger, it just felt more like home to me. But if you can adjust it with the physics, yes, it does offer a little more responsiveness. And that's the thinking behind it. Now, even though, you know, this really isn't important, but it's important to establish the this is very important to establish relationships. So that's why I'm actually going to go ahead and hit this here. And I'm just going to crawl along here. And that's another thing, is to establish all of the relationships as you're working. And that's going to help you with the likeness. How is that going to help you with the likeness? Because if you have everything down and you're starting to worry about relationships, it's easy to see something's off than at the end when you're like, when I'm like, oh my God, it looks nothing like them. So these are all things that aren't safeguards, but they do help, and do help you to see, okay, this is darker, so I realize that, you know, we have some darks here on the side plane that not as dark as that, maybe darker than the cheek here. So you see that sort of working relationships is so important. Raul says, I'll get the Slim 2020 next when my budget allows. Gotta sell some art. Definitely, I hear that. That's what I do whenever I you know, buy a new piece of equipment. I always justify it by doing something to sell, you know what I mean? And to make sure it pays for itself so I don't feel so guilty. And that's really cool. Yes, Raul's, Bradley said he sold some pieces, so he was able to go ahead and put that back into his business, into his art, which is very cool. And that's what it is, right? I mean, our art is our business. If it's not our business today, it's going to be, as far as making a living. That's one of the things I said earlier, guys, is that I actually have, one of my things is I always make eyebrows smaller than what they are. So I always tend to make eyebrows a little bit bigger than what I think. It's just a weird thing that, you know, it's just always been that way. So sometimes you got to make a conscious effort to combat some proclivities that we have, especially as a portrait painter. And now we can start coming in with the eraser techniques. Very lightly though, you don't want to go crazy. You just want to, you don't want to tear into that paper too early, right? It's very important. So as you can see, we're in the first hour. We finished the first hour, and now we could, you know, maybe get a little bit deeper into this. Let me see where that glove is. Now this glove is really good because it helps me not to smudge my artwork. And that's a real problem when working on paper, or any surface for that matter, is, you know, making sure we don't mess up the work with our hands, you know. Yes, congrats, Bradley. That's very cool. Just getting rid of some of the pencil lines here. Same thing here. Gonna lighten the pencil lines here because the value right here from the hat in this little square-like shape is a little darker. Actually, a lot darker. Let's go ahead and establish that. Okay, I will be right back, guys. Okay, great. So we are working back, and we're not really staying in one area. We're just moving around, you know. There we go. Just keeping that going. And then let's go back to this dark here. There we go. So it's very cool to see, working on the different values around, how you're really starting to get a sense of the light. Oh, Willie says she's already looking great. Thanks, Willie. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that vote of confidence, my friend. And if you're just like, we're just worried about the light, you know, just what the light is doing, how it feels. And it's going to go a long way. And so we'll just sort of continue that. There we go. So now we get a feeling of that hat, which is very important. Heath says, Tim, are you done with the white or more to do yet? Yes, there will be some more to do. And what I do is down the line, I will go ahead and build up some more white with the white India ink on some of, not the highlights, but where light is built up. Maybe, let me see if I just lower this here. So you'll see that we have this whole white area done, right? Like right here. And I will go ahead and build this up with some more white. Maybe just go over it a couple of times till I get that little bit, not basically the highlight yet, but the buildup of lights. And the same thing, so I would do that. But then also keeping in mind that I'm going to actually use the white pastel, and that's going to be my ability to get those beautiful highlights like in the eye and everything. So, you know, where we are right now, we're going to get to here, and you can see where, you know, I might have came in with the white initially, but then I built it up here. And then also, like, where I would come in with the white pastel at the very end would be maybe right here, the highlights, you know, those really sharp lights, which are really, really important to get. So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different working with the gunmetal as opposed to, let's say, the Dreadnought Gray, where we already have a light background and we really can't go much lighter than the background. But here we can go much lighter, so we can have a lot of degrees of white, which is really cool. And that's why I like the gunmetal, because there's more to do with the white and you can play with the values a little bit more. And I think you get a deeper look as far as three-dimensionality. But it all depends on the reference too, right, guys? So it's very important to plan out what paper am I using, and with that being said, what photograph do I need? You know, what type of photograph? That sort of thing. If I need to change it, can I change it in Photoshop? Sure, and you can maybe deepen the values, increase or lessen the contrast. Those different things will really help. And let's see, right here on the tip of her nose, we can make it a little bit darker, just like that. See, that's what I mean. Like here, although we have a light, there are some things going on in the light. You know, there are darks and there are highlights, and you know, we want to maybe just in this mid-tone range, we'll go ahead and hit some of those relationships right now. Oh, and so Bradley says, I need to order some of that paper. Yes. I would, you know, definitely the two colors, Dreadnought Gray and the gunmetal. Dreadnought Gray is really good. I would probably ease into Dreadnought Gray. I mean, ease into gunmetal, because Dreadnought Gray is going to be a lot easier time for you in the beginning of this technique. Also, the value, the color values are a lot different. This is very blue, and the other one, color, the gunmetal's very blue, very cool color, as opposed to the Dreadnought Gray, which is a very warm gray. Definitely going to change your approach to the portrait. And again, we're working on that hat just to get a sense of the light. And then we can go deeper and more detailed. You want to use the tone of the paper as well, which is very good. Bradley says, change your approach. Does the white color shift any? Very good question. And basically the white shift is something that you have to prepare for. And that's why I always go dark over light as opposed to light over dark. If you go in dark over light, Bradley, you're not going to have that shift, and you're going to have a very good time at it. If you go light over dark, that's when it gets bad. Now, I did some experiments the other day, and you can do that. Like right here, you'll see that this is all opaque. And one of the ways I combated that was by adding a little bit of red to it. Same thing here. This is all light over dark, and I'm able to do that by adding some red to it, which is really good. Oh, Bradley says the phone picked up on the TV. That's pretty cool. So you can answer your phone on the TV, is that correct? That's cool. Let's get our freehand shield here and work on this nice, beautiful hard edge here. Now I have a variety of erasers that I do use, not just that one. This is a also by Faber-Castell Perfection 7046. Has like a pink pearl inside, which is pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find some of those lights in this shadow area right there. And that's just not strong enough, so we will go a little more aggressive. Even if you have an aggressive eraser, if you are not aggressive with the application, you can still get subtlety while protecting the surface. You can even go ahead and maybe soften a line if you have to, or even make the line sharper. A lot of different things you can do with the eraser. And let's see, Alan says, his honoration says, what service are you using? I'm sure you already said, but I went away working on my laptop again, having technical difficulties still. No problem. This is Gunmetal it's Canford cardstock, and the color is Gunmetal, and it's by De La Rowney, and it comes in pack of 10. You get at Dick Blick. Costs between $8 and $9. So that's definitely, it comes in a larger size. The larger size are much more expensive, so the smaller size you get a pack of 10, which is great, which is pretty cool. And Bradley says, I was talked to text on my phone, and then it picked up where you were saying on the TV. And Willie says, I've been going crazy picking up different types of erasers. Very cool. That's just going to pay dividends. That's cool. It's always, you never know when that particular eraser is the perfect eraser, right? So the more erasers you have is very good. You can never have too many of them. There we go. So you see we're moving things around, but the most important thing that we're establishing right now is we are getting a likeness, but we're not worried about the likeness. We're worried about relationships and larger shapes. Relationship, just like right here, you can see that this eye is darker than this eye. So we can do that not by getting the exact value, but getting the relationships. And then as we go darker, we'll just, continue the same relationship, but going darker. And the likeness is going to come anyway. So, we're not even, we're not even worried too much about the likeness. We're worried about larger issues right now. There we go. Just get that nice hard edge. Really get that cast shadow feeling. Remember, there's form shadow and cast shadow. Those are the two things. Is this a form shadow with the nose? Yes. Is this a cast shadow with the hat onto a forehead? Yes. So form shadow and cast shadow are different. They have whole different feelings about them, feels to them. So definitely always try to identify that when working. And Bradley says, what kind of eraser is the one with the brush that you said was aggressive? Oh, great. This is by Faber-Castell. It's called the Perfection 7058, B is in Bravo. Then we have this one, which is the 7058 without the B. That's even more aggressive without the brush at the end. Same thing here. And we will go ahead and just continue to get that feeling of that cast shadow. And it's a deep dark too, but I think that goes a long way to help us establish, okay, so that's a nice dark. That's not even as dark as we're going to go. It looks dark because everything else is so light at this stage. But it also makes me realize that it's much lighter here. See that? We can go ahead and lighten the dark of the hair, which we thought was really dark until we went ahead and put that cast shadow there. See that? So that really is helping. Heath says, me, erasers and mistakes have developed relationships. And Bradley says, amen, Heath. That's funny. Yes, erasers are important. And thank God for erasers. And this technique is pretty forgiving. Not as forgiving as other techniques, but I think it is. I think you can make a plethora of mistakes using this India ink technique and still be good. You just learn from your mistakes so next painting it doesn't become an issue, right? That's so important. So what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to go ahead and reiterate that dark. Since I went dark here, that means I have to go darker in the hat. This ribbon, I guess. Is that what it's called? A ribbon in the hat or something? I don't know what it's called. I don't wear too many hats. Like I said, it's always good to do that perpendicular to your freehand shield and also wiping it clean in between. See how, off camera I'm wiping this off. I don't want to reposition wet ink. I initially said that this will be a 3-part series in the description, but if it's a 4 or 5-part series, I don't care, I'm not going to rush this. I don't even rush commission portraits. When I do a commission, it's pretty much, it'll get done when it gets done. If it's for a gift, I tell them, make sure that you give me enough time to finish it. I don't do rush jobs because I think it really hurts the work. So deepening this, we really get a sense of everything else around, which is nice. So we're already at 11:11, which is pretty good. I mean, I think this live stream has gone pretty well. We didn't have a large group today, but it's good because I was able to actually talk more about the technique. And we went over some really good technique today. Establish that nice hard edge. But you see how basically how we are working on that white so we can get that sort of bas relief of the flesh, the light hitting the flesh coming above the surface of the paper. So we can come in with the 3-to-3 mixture with the ink and sort of push things back. So we really, all of a sudden, using 3 values, the value of the paper, the value of the white, and then the value of the 3-to-3 mixture. So already we're getting that sort of, you know, 3-dimensional quality. And we're building relationships, which is really fantastic. And so you see, as I darken this, I have to darken this as well. It's all dagger strokes, right? And right, Willie? It's all dagger strokes. In the event that one area becomes too dark, you can adjust it several ways. You can adjust it by, you know, maybe using your eraser to catch up, you know, pull the part that's darker than the other area, or you can just darken the rest of the area. But there's so many different ways to fix any kind of mistakes as they occur. And since we deepened this area, we can actually go ahead and deepen the side plane of her hair here. Not worried about individual hairs. Worry about planes having this sort of turn. Because if we have a side plane here, and this hair is parallel to the side plane of her cheek, which is in shadow, that in turn should also be in shadow. And Willie says, will I put a lot of detail in her clothes? Definitely, definitely. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to do some drawing here in the clothes. I'm not going to do that on camera. So in between this week and next week, I'll do some drawing. And then I'll go in and do some detail in this sleeve here, which will be really nice. And over here, just to, you know, really reiterate everything. So I thought it would be bad if I just went in and just kept drawing over here. And I think it would be best to just show you guys how I build up relationships. But definitely this is going to be detailed, definitely. Same thing over here. And might use a little more of the white pastel over there, but we'll see. And, you know, just not sure exactly what I'm going to do, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to use the white pastel over there. And let's go ahead and do this cast shadow of her arm. And we're going to get a feeling of this being a cast shadow because of the value relationships. You see there's a little bit of reflected light coming from her arm or hand. So it's going to be a little bit lighter here, a little bit darker here. And those different, looking at the relationships is going to go a long way with creating depth. Like I said, we're not as dark as we want to be, but we're just getting relationships down. As we darken everything, you'll see it, everything sort of comes together. There you go. And let's get the dark, where the her blouse sort of meets her breast, or her chest, I should say. It's going to be dark where those two meet. It's going to create some depth. And this is all cast shadow right here. It's always important to identify what... Hey, what's going on, David? Good to see you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Good to see you, sir. And as you can see, what I'm going to be doing is just little by little creating depth here. And this is all with dagger strokes. Thank you so much, David. I appreciate that, sir. And over here, we're going to go ahead and use our freehand shield. And we're going to create that hard edge where the cast shadow is meeting with the light hitting the blouse. See that? So we're getting that sort of movement of the cut of the cast shadow. Now, one of the things I want you to realize about cast shadows is that the difference between, let me see if I can show you real quick. Now you see how a form shadow sort of goes around. This is an indication of a form shadow. It sort of wraps, it sort of turns as the form turns away from the light. It gets progressively darker and darker. And that's what a form shadow does. What a cast shadow does, it basically sort of drapes over it the way, let's say, a sheet drapes over a car. It'll cast on top of the image, but it will actually go along and describe the form in the direction of the form, which is really great. So that is, that's a really good lesson to remember. Cast shadows, if you really look, are going to help you to describe that form of your model and really create, as you can see just right now, create a sense of who she is in three-dimensional space. We have a nice form shadow right here. Always remember, perpendicular to using your freehand shield, you want to go perpendicular to the freehand shield. So we're looking at relationship, guys, and you can see we have relationship between this cast shadow and this cast shadow. So what that's telling me is that we have a cast shadow here and a cast shadow here. Now looking at the relationships of my image, I can see that these values are very similar. And that's what you want to do. You want to keep moving around, and where you see the similarity of those values, you want to make sure you catch it up. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and darken this cast shadow. Remember, it's not a form shadow. It behaves differently than a cast shadow behaves differently than a form shadow. And I think that's also going to help you, Willie, with your likenesses, is, you know, just identifying a cast shadow as opposed to a form shadow. It's very interesting how in chess they talk about different techniques to win a game, whether it's attacking or defending, and they call it tactics. And I think I'd like to call a lot of my method of working as tactics, not tricks. I don't like the term trick. There's no trick in working your butt off to get here. I work my butt off to get here. So I learned tactics. I didn't really learn tricks. So that's actually a good way to look at it. Look at it as learning tactics as you would with strategy, tactical strategy. I want to make sure I establish that hard edge of her finger as it's coming forward. Same thing here. We have the other side of her finger. So I want to really make sure I have that shape described very well. Now everything looks really dark right now, but only because we're just working on relationships. This is going to be almost black. That's going to be almost black. And right now it's at a gray, so. We don't have a lot of people at this live stream. However, I do feel that it's a very successful live stream because of what we were able to go over, some really good questions, and I think it was a very good learning tool for you guys. And then right here we can work on some detail. And as you darken one area, you can see that it changes the relationships of different area, or changes the values of a different area. So darkening here means I have to go ahead and darken the eyes and catch everything up. And that's why this technique or this method is, you know, really great, because you get dark as you go, and she sort of comes together, but on their own accord. But as you see, Willie, we're getting a likeness. We're not really thinking too much. The likeness is happening because of what we're paying attention to. So let's see if we could go ahead and use our eraser and maybe lighten this area up just a tad. We might end up darkening it up later, but I think right now, as far as our relationship goes, it's a little bit too dark. And I'm being very, very soft with the eraser. Hey, Heath, and Heath says, loving the arm and the hand look and the shadows they create. Great learnings. Thanks, Heath. And Willie says, I feel like I just learned more about shadows from you than I have from books. and it only took a couple of minutes. Thank you so. That means a lot to me, guys. Thank you so much for that. Yes, really. I really want to teach like how important it is to understand light, because we're really, whether we're doing a still life or a portrait, or or painting, a landscape, we're really just working on the light. We're really just trying to understand what the light is doing as it's hitting the form. All right, there, that's a little bit too dark, but we're going to let that dry. One of the things is to let that dry. It's very crucial to let that dry before we come in with the eraser. And Dave says, once I master my oils again, I may try to take this on. When I was young, I was very good with values and shadows. Very cool. Yes, I love what you're doing with your oil paints there, Dave. And, it's all about the lighting, definitely. And I think, down the line, you might love Airbrush, David. That would be great. And Willie says, you're a wonderful teacher. I appreciate that so much, sir. More than you know. Thank you. Teaching is something that, just sort of happened, But I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy sharing the joy of it, right? The fun. And you guys get more fun out of your airbrush, believe me, that's a win for me. I see too often people they get an airbrush and they just stop because there isn't anyone out there to teach them. And they're sort of like showing people, like, okay, we're going to work on a car and we're going to do this and we're going to do, no, that is not the way. And I think that's overwhelming for many. And, how many people have cars to work on? And also, going straight into color. I think that's too many things to really tackle at once. But learning in black and white is the best because everything's in black and white. And then when you master the black and white, color, when you want to do it, is far easier. Just going to work on that dark right there on her nose. Heath says, been a blast, great knowledge. Thanks, Tim. See you all next week. Hey, Heath, thanks so much, man. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming. And I will talk to you next Wednesday. So cool. So we are at 11:29. So this has been a really good live stream, guys. I really think perhaps we're not to the point where next week's going to be the last one. But that's okay because like I said, I'd rather be about teaching and patience than, getting it done in a certain time period. That's what's more important. And later we're going to come in with that Blackbeard wheat to get some of that really great texture in the hair. That's the only time I'll use any kind of real stencil-y kind of thing is this. But, I think that's a good use of it. What I want to do is devise a way where I can make this turn. If I had 3 hands, I could do it, right? I can just turn it and then spray, but alas, I only have 2 hands. All right, guys, so Bradley, Heath, Dave, thanks for coming by. Raul, Bill, Bradley, I mentioned you as well, and Alan, and let's see, make sure I didn't miss Heath. Thank you, guys. It's been a small, really cool, small live stream as far as audience, but I think that worked in our advantage. I think we learned a lot, and we really went really far with this. And as you can see, we're getting to the point where I think we have a nice basis for bringing this together. I would say 2 more episodes. Next week, we're going to bring in the values. and work on this here in her clothing. And then the week after that, we're going to bring it all together with the darkest darks, and then the highlights. It's going to look great. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you have a great week. Take care, and it's been a pleasure and an honor. Bye-bye, guys.